guys, it's Meal Before Me, and I'm back with another food review. This time we're checking out Lean Cuisine. I'm sure you know it, but in case you don't, it's a line of frozen meals with an emphasis on portion control, and all of their meals are 400 calories or less with 10 grams of fat or less. The line was launched as part of the Stouffer's brand, which is owned by Nestle's, and they work with chefs and nutritionists to craft delicious meals with health and wellness in mind. They have a rewards program you can sign up for on their website, and they're related to a newer line of meals called Life Cuisine, which focuses on high protein, low carb, gluten-free, or meatless options. So I wanted to try Lean Cuisine after my experience with Smart Ones, because someone interested in weight loss with cheap frozen meals like Smart Ones would probably also have an eye on Lean Cuisine, so it made sense to compare them. Thankfully, they were on sale this week for $3 each. Most were $4.29 regular price, and the rest were cheaper, so they're generally about $1 and change more than Smart Ones. I bought all the varieties available at my grocery except the few that were sold out, and that left me with 15 meals, which isn't a lot considering that they make around 40 or so, but it's still a decent amount to review for a video. The question now is, how does it taste? And I didn't eat before this because by the time I'm done with these taste tests, I feel gross, and I did not want to make that worse. To the table! So I divided the meals into two categories because they had two different labels, either protein kick or comfort cravings. Since I didn't see the official definition on the website, I looked at the boxes. The comfort ones just say they're crave worthy, and the protein ones highlight the daily percentage of protein. I'm starting with the crave worthy since there's only 3 of them, and I'll be rating them only by repeatability, meaning would I eat it again? First up is classic macaroni and beef. It was simple, but I liked it. The meat was finely minced, so it had more of a meat sauce texture than the texture of sauce with ground beef in it. There were some cheese and tomato bits that didn't stand out separately, but added nicely to the texture overall and to the flavor of the whole thing. It had a lot more flavor than I expected, to the point where I kept eating it, so I guess it is crave worthy. And there was nothing funky about it at all, which was a refreshing change from my Smart Ones review. Repeatability is yes. Next, we have lasagna with meat sauce. It's one of the few that says you can put it in the oven. Most of them say not to, so make sure you check the instructions because they're not all the same. Some say slit the plastic to vent, others say don't touch it, others say remove it entirely, etc. But this one was great. It had nice tomato chunks, and I'm not a fan of tomatoes except when it's in something like this, so the fact that I like how chunky they were here says a lot. The noodles had a fantastic, chewy al dente texture to them. I think it had 2 layers. The meat sauce was again very flavorful, but it didn't taste like the first one at all. This one tasted like lasagna, and I could see something that looked like ricotta cheese, which I could also taste, so I really like this one. Repeatability is yes. And last in the comfort cravings category is chicken fettuccine. The sauce was nice and thick, but it was really bland. The chicken had that frozen meal meat texture I don't like. Not the spongy one, but that other one that's like biting into hard Spam. The only highlight here was really just the texture of the noodles. Otherwise, I didn't care for this one at all, so repeatability is no. On to the protein kick category. Up first is spinach and mushroom pizza. I'm holding it in my hand because the box was the kind that you fold over with the silver crisper side and cook that way. Though the perforations for the box weren't great, so I basically had to destroy the box to get it to do what it had to do, but it did its job. This one was okay. The mushrooms had no flavor and the cheese was bland, but the spinach was very spinachy. The crust was basically like pita bread in texture and taste, which I love. So solely because it's not as flavorful as I'd like, I was going to say the repeatability is no, but it does tell me that I'd like any other pizza they make, so I'll instead say that I would eat it again and just, dip it in some marinara or something. I just wouldn't buy it again. Sticking with the Italian theme, next up is chicken Parmesan. While the chicken was less spongy than the chicken parm from Smart Ones, it still had that sponginess to it. I don't know what makes that happen with frozen meals, but it was at least tolerable here. And I would say that both the chicken and the sauce were so flavorful, it made me overlook the texture. There were even bigger tomato chunks here that exploded in my mouth when I bit into them. It was like having a fresh tomato, very yummy. So despite the not ideal chicken texture, repeatability for this one is definitely a yes. Then we have roasted turkey and vegetables. The gravy covered it nicely, but it didn't have a punch of flavor. I wouldn't say it's bland, it was just fine. The vegetables, again, tasted fresh. The beans were in that middle state I like, where they're not mushy, but they're also not crunchy. There were huge potato chunks that tasted seasoned with salt at least, and the turkey had a great texture. This one honestly tasted a bit like someone made it, not like it was frozen. I was into it more than I expected to be, so repeatability is yes. Next, we have another turkey meal, glazed turkey and tenderloins. You usually get sweet potatoes with these in other brands, but the sweet potato here was sweet, maybe a bit too sweet for my liking, but in a way that a sprinkle of saltiness would balance out, which is where the rest of it comes in. The stuffing was fluffy with a nice chew, not mushy, even with the gravy mixed in. The turkey had a great texture and flavor by itself, and while you can see itty bitty celery bits, I didn't taste much celery at all, and I'm fine with that because I hate celery. It ruins everything it's in for me, but here it only added what it needed to add and no more, so it was still very tasty. Repeatability is yes. Now we're on to the chicken-centric meals, starting with baked chicken. The chicken was that weird frozen texture again, though the flavor was okay, not great. The mashed potatoes tasted fantastic. Like, I don't know what happened here. It tasted like it had maybe chives or something in it, I couldn't tell. And the stuffing was also great, but the gravy had that overpowering celery taste I just can't get past, and you can even see the bigger chunks of it here than in the last one. So repeatability is no just because of that, and it's a shame because those potatoes were really, really good. Next is apple cranberry chicken, and the chicken textures haven't been great so far compared to the turkey, but this one was good. I did notice that when the chicken pieces are those uniform rectangles like in the other ones, that's when they have that weird, almost woody texture, but when they're in these broken up, non-uniform pieces like this, they taste like regular chicken. I'd love to know the difference between the two in terms of how they're processed because the difference in taste and texture is very noticeable, but however they make these, that's preferred. It's got a lot of orzo pasta, which I hate, but I hate this more because it's whole wheat orzo, and that wheatiness is just bringing the flavor down. You know, I feel like I'm eating dirt. The chicken flavor is great. The cranberries are always a hit with me. I love cranberries. And the veggies are, again, really fresh tasting with a good texture, but the sauce is bland in a way that's letting that orzo's wheatiness overpower it. So repeatability is a hard no. But again, if you like the taste of whole wheat, you may dig this. Next is buffalo style chicken. The texture and flavor of the chicken on its own was okay, you know, maybe somewhere between the ones I said are good and the ones I said aren't. The buffalo sauce was nice and thick, and the flavor was spot on to what you'd expect, just with a lot less heat. So if you can't normally deal with buffalo wings, this wouldn't be as intense. What brought this one down was the mashed potatoes. They were super watery, thin, and bland. Even mixing everything in together, it just lessened the flavor of everything else. And since meat with buffalo sauce isn't something I'd eat for a meal anyway, you know, I save that for wings with pizza and blue cheese dip, etc. This was a quick one. Repeatability is absolutely not. They need to take this one back to the drawing board. Next is maple bourbon chicken. It had cranberries, which again, I always love. The sweet potato chunks weren't seasoned at all, but they did taste fresh, like if I literally just cut a chunk out of a sweet potato, steamed it, then stuck it here. The chicken had a great texture and was well seasoned, but the star was that maple bourbon sauce. It was really thick and had a little sweetness, but with that hint of bourbon alcohol depth. Really a fan of that. I don't like wild rice or whatever this rice blend is. It has an unpleasantly rough texture, but that maple sauce righted all wrongs, okay? You know, mixing it together, the rice then just added density that made it really filling. It's supposed to have pecans. I didn't notice them, but this is another one I could eat all day. Repeatability is yes. Now we have the Asian-inspired meals, starting with orange chicken. I haven't talked about the smell yet because nothing stood out, but this one hit me with a really hard whiff of broccoli that I did not like. The veggies alone, and I feel like a broken record saying this, but they again had that nice steamed taste and texture, but the chicken was breaded, and that coating gave it a gumminess and a floury taste that I just didn't like at all. The sauce was also a very toned down, blander version of whatever orange chicken should taste like, so this was another easy one. Wouldn't eat this again. Repeatability is no. Next is sesame chicken. The veggie texture was fine, and I'm glad I tried this one after the other one because while the chicken looked like it had the same breading, it wasn't gummy at all, and I think it's because of how big the chicken pieces were here. It allowed more of the chicken texture to stand out rather than it just tasting like breading alone, because when I bit into one of the smaller pieces, it still wasn't anywhere near as gummy as the last meal, but it was getting there. So the big chicken pieces are a plus for taste and texture, and also for making it feel more substantial. I honestly don't think I've ever tried a frozen meal with chicken pieces in it that looked like this or that were this size. They usually look like chicken nuggets. So that was a pleasant surprise. Then the noodle texture, it was okay. And the sesame sauce is a bit sweet and mild. It was watery, but that didn't compromise anything. So repeatability for this one, especially because of the chicken, is yes. Next is Korean-style beef and veggies. I don't like the texture of this rice, so I tried that and the veggies first, and it was just okay. I worried that the little meat cubes would have the similar problem to the chicken rectangles with texture, and when I first bit into one, I thought I was right, but it broke apart in a way that I liked better. Then I jumped straight to the sauce, which was a peppery, beefy sauce with a lot of sweetness to it, but the pepper stood out way more. I liked it a lot, which was surprising. I'm usually not into very peppery things, but I like this here. It was worth mixing everything together to get that sauce all over everything. Repeatability because of the sauce is yes. And finally, we have chicken teriyaki. The texture of the chicken and noodles were fine, but it fell short for me with the sauce. It was very rich and flavorful, which I'm sure you can see, so that's a plus, but it leaned hard into that intense soy sauce saltiness you'd get from, a cheap teriyaki sauce off the shelf compared to the more layered teriyaki sauce you'd get from a restaurant, or honestly even a food court that has a balance of sweetness or nuttiness or something else to it. This was just too much, it was almost like it was just soy sauce and nothing else, so repeatability is no. Getting into my final thoughts, coming off reviewing Smart Ones a few weeks ago, I can say this without hesitation: Lean Cuisine blows it out of the water. It's not even debatable. In no universe would I ever buy Smart Ones again instead of Lean Cuisine, even taking the difference in price into account. For these to only be $1 and change more, I can justify it, okay? Like even the ones I wouldn't buy again, I'd buy again before buying any of the Smart Ones. Except maybe the breakfast. Those from Smart Ones were alright. In general, Smart Ones seems like a lower tier brand across the board, though with a lot of variation. You can check out that review to get the specifics and which ones were okay to me in case you do want to save that $1, because I get it, money doesn't grow on trees. Or if you're someone who does Weight Watchers, since Smart Ones ties into it, so I think you can fit them into that system. As far as how I'd rate Lean Cuisine on its own, not comparing it to Smart Ones, but to frozen food in general, I'm genuinely surprised by how not frozen it tastes, but also by how good it tastes. While the meat still had some of those hallmarks of frozen meals, mainly the chicken, the veggies tasted, looked, and smelled like I just cut them up and steamed them myself. The lows were the Asian-style meals, though at this point that could just be me, because I really love Asian food, but Asian frozen meals have their own thing I don't like going on that tastes nearly the same regardless of the brand, and that doesn't taste anything like their Asian counterparts to me. So I'm not surprised I wasn't into them. And the highs were the Italian meals, but I feel like that's usually the case with frozen brands since it's hard to mess up cheese, pasta, and tomato sauce. They just had much more flavor here than I expected. Beyond that, everything else in between was tasty enough that I just kind of kept eating it. And even the ones that were bland would probably be delicious with a pinch of salt. Again, none of it is restaurant quality, but I think you could pass many of these off as homemade, which I didn't expect. Now, I mentioned in the other review that while I mostly cook, I always grab a few frozen meals for days when I don't feel like it, and my go-to is Devour, but I'm adding Lean Cuisine to my list. For the taste, portions, and price, I think it's worth it to grab a few on sale. I actually liked it enough that I'm now curious about all the other varieties my grocery doesn't have, especially the other pizzas. My one issue is that I'm sodium sensitive, so I don't like eating store-bought meals over, let's say 300 milligrams, give or take, and some of these run very high, but still not as high as when I lose my mind and get a craving for a Hungry Man dinner that's like 1600. So while I wouldn't eat the ones with a lot of sodium constantly, I definitely still eat them. But let me know if you like Lean Cuisine, and if you haven't tried any of them and decide to try them now, come back and let us all know what you think. Thanks so much for watching MEM, and I'll see you snackies when I'm backies.